After traveling through ancient times, Obuyue discovered that her family was extraordinary. Her mother has driven mechs, her father has been an emperor, and her foolish brother possesses divine power. And she holds the space artifact, which can be upgraded by walking. In the early stages of travel, there were natural disasters, starving people everywhere, bureaucratic corruption, internal and external troubles, and people's livelihoods were in dire straits. The road to escape from famine is full of ups and downs. The obscure Moon family has cultivated fields, rushed through the sea, crossed deserts, and visited grasslands. Every new home built is destroyed in the blink of an eye due to natural and man-made disasters. My heart is tired, let's destroy this world. Dad and Mom looked at each other and said, Misty Moon doesn't cry. Mom and Dad will unify the country and give you a peaceful and prosperous era. Keywords of the novel. Before fleeing the famine, I emptied the government office to hoard billions of supplies without a pop-up window. Before fleeing, I emptied the government office to hoard billions of supplies. Download the complete text. Before fleeing, I emptied the government office to hoard billions of supplies. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. This family is not ordinary. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. This family is not ordinary. Every day when Obuyue opens her eyes, she can see her mother beating her father. I let you work, you run inside and take a deep sleep, it's so disorganized and undisciplined. The hazy moon mother of the cloth-clothed Jingchai knocked her father out of the house with a broom, shouting, if you were a lazy man who didn't obey orders, I would have surprised you so long ago if you were a soldier in my mech camp. And the lazy father of Obuyue shouted to protect him while retorting, I am the emperor. You, this woman, dare to instruct me to work and even beat me. I will execute your 9 clans. Sitting on the Kong, the hazy moon held her cheeks with both hands, and was already accustomed to the playfulness of her parents. Misty Moon looked up at the thatched cottage, with its bright big eyes filled with a faint sadness. Speaking of it, it's both mystical and bloody. Today is the 9th day she has traveled to this world. But what's even more outrageous is that she found out that her parents in this life were also reincarnated through time travel. Based on observations over the past 2 days, it can be inferred from the conversation and behavior of her parents that she was probably an interstellar general in her past life, shouldering the mission of eliminating the Zerg race and revitalizing humanity. And her father's past life should have been the last emperor of a feudal dynasty. According to memory, this family surnamed Su accidentally ate poisonous wild vegetables due to hunger, so the whole family was poisoned to death. Obuyue remembered when she first came through, there were several terrifying-looking corpses lying in the room. When she tried to dig a pit to bury the body, the tightly closed Auntie suddenly jumped up from the ground, pressing her shoulders with both hands and staring at her with bright eyes, saying, I know what the secret of a brain worm is. After his father pretended to be a corpse, he looked at the broken wooden window and sighed at the moon, I am not the ruler of a fallen country. According to her original memory, the great Qin kingdom she traveled to did not belong to any dynasty in history, it was a fictional dynasty. In the 4th year of the Qingli reign, there was a severe drought in northern and central Hunan. From the beginning of summer to autumn, there was not a single drop of rain in northern Hunan for 3 or 4 months. The ponds of all sizes had already dried up, and the riverbed of the river had already bottomed out, revealing rugged stones. The crops in the field have not been harvested, and the people have no food to eat. They are so hungry that they can only tighten their belts. Moreover, they have to face various harsh taxes and levies. Located in the northern part of Yucheng, Shujia village, backed by the Han River, allows villagers to go to the increasingly dry Han River to fetch water and barely survive. People with some connections in other villages have started to move their families one after another, and those who cannot escape, old, weak, sick, and disabled, have all died at home. Obuyue once saw elderly people in other villages who were as thin as straw begging. It is said that they finally got something to eat, but when they brought it home, they found that their grandson had starved to death. Several big mice were gnawing on the child's head, and that night, the elderly person hanged himself. The famine in northern Hunan has lasted for a long time, but the relief funds from the court have not yet arrived. There are rumors in the market that the relief funds have been issued long ago, but they are unknown where they have been sent. So there is a poem circulating in the community about how to beat oil, how the land grins and turns, how sad the grain is, how bitter the people are, and how fat the officials are. In recent years, disasters have occurred frequently in Daqing, and there have been constant party struggles within the court. There have been rampant bandits from all over the country, and there are also Chang people watching from outside. People's lives are in a state of hot water. Thinking of this, Obuyue rubbed her eyebrows and said, "Alas, the beginning was a hellish difficulty mode. Oh my goodness, I really appreciate it. Forget it, take it as it comes, there will always be a way. Besides, when the sky falls, there will be a woman holding on." In just a few days of getting along, Obuyue had already admired her cheap mistress Shaninxing and decided to hold on to her maternal thigh. When Shaninxing angrily brought his own husband back, he saw his 6-year-old daughter sitting on the Kong smiling at her as soon as he entered the door. The smile of the hazy moon almost melted her heart. This small jade ball was really cute and well behaved, and the little milk voice called out to her every time, making her heart burst with joy. In the previous life, due to physical reasons, she was unable to conceive. In this life, she had such a lovely daughter, and Shaninxing wished to give her the whole world. Shaninxing dropped the emperor's husband on the ground and kneaded the milk fat on the face of Fuyue lovingly. "Fuyue is hungry. Her mother cooked pickled congee in the morning and will feed you right away." Just now, Shaninxing, who looked like a mother tiger, muttered to her gentle and virtuous father, who was huddled in a corner, a woman with two faces. Upon hearing this, Shaninxing flew over with a dagger and said, "Go and sharpen the arrow. We'll go up the mountain to hunt later, don't wait for the mountain to be empty-handed." Faced with the pressure of the female general, Obuyue's father twitched his lips and had to follow suit. After all, he couldn't beat her at all. He had never seen such a fierce woman who could kill a tiger with bare hands. Shaninxing brought half a bowl of hot congee with a big bowl of coarse porcelain that was missing. He first scooped up a spoonful and tasted the cold and hot, then put it on his mouth and blew it before feeding it to Fuyue. The dim moon looked at the dark pickled congee in the spoon, and her eyes paused. "The congee looks bad at first sight, but now it's a barren year, and there isn't much food to eat. Some are just good to eat, it's better than starving." Fuyue pokes her head out and drinks congee at once. Unexpectedly, the rice bran is rough and choked after eating, and the pickled vegetable stems are bitter and astringent. Congee tastes like a thick sour rag, and the bowl is also littered with burnt congee dregs reasonably, although rice bran is difficult to swallow, at least it will smell like rice after being cooked. The burnt congee residue and strange taste show that it is not a matter of food ingredients at all. Drink congee quickly. It's much better than nutrition. Shaninxing spooned another spoonful of congee and put it on her daughter's mouth. Misty moon. Faced with the eager gaze of his mother, Obuyue could only swallow this dark dish with a bitter face. The emperor's father, who was grinding arrows next to him, could only cast sympathetic glances at her when he saw this scene. "Alas, let's eat. Although it's difficult to swallow, drinking it will at least prevent hunger and stomach pain, and this is also the last bit of food left at home." With the eager gaze of his mother, Obuyue finished most of the bowl with tears in her eyes. After feeding Obuyue a meal, Shaninxing grabbed her cursed husband and went hunting in the mountains, instructing Obuyue to keep an eye on her brother and not let him run around. Full of food, the hazy moon strolled on the bare fields with her short legs, and the dry and cracked land grinned like a child's mouth, making a popping sound when sweat dripped down. Behind her was a foolish young man with a silly expression. This foolish older brother was picked up by the Su family's father from the wilderness 2 years ago. Last year, he fell ill and burned his brain. After waking up from eating wild vegetables, he still lost consciousness, but he had a strange aura. However, he still liked to stick to his sister as usual. Before taking a few steps, the foolish brother behind Obuyue tugged at her clothes and pointed in the direction of the village entrance, smiling and saying, "Sister, look, there are donkeys." On the narrow path outside the village, a group of servants with knives and sticks at their waist walked towards the village with several farmers. The farmers carried bamboo baskets on their shoulders, followed by several horses carrying the baskets. Misty Moon squinted her eyes. Isn't this battle about conscription? End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Misty Moon captured. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Misty Moon captured. In the blink of an eye, the group of servants arrived at Shuja village. However, to the surprise of Obuyue, the bamboo baskets carried by the farmers were not filled with collected food, but with children aged 5 or 6. The children were crying with frightened eyes on the edge of the basket, while a wide-robed man wearing a crown and a shoe-pulled face sat high on a horse, scolding the crying children in the basket to shut up. Misty Moon thought to herself, what situation is this? The government has started to resell children. Feeling a bit off, while the servants were still far away, Obuyue pulled her brother and ran home. Upon entering the house, she immediately locked the door and hid it under the windowsill, perking up her ears to listen to the movements of the village. As soon as the servants entered the village, they knocked on the door's door from door to door. The villagers saw the servants coming from afar, afraid that they would come to collect grain taxes again. They closed their doors early and pretended that there was no one at home, while the servants who had already gained experience in collecting taxes chose to directly smash the doors. Open the door. The servant knocked the wooden door of the Obuyue family with a thud, shaking the earthen walls to dust. The hazy moon inside the house tightly covered the foolish brother's mouth, telling him not to speak. A sharp-eyed servant noticed a figure shaking inside the wooden door and immediately shouted loudly, "Everyone is hiding inside. Break the door open." A few servants rushed forward and kicked fiercely upon hearing the wind, and the loose wooden door couldn't resist the turmoil. Before Obuyue could react, the wooden door was kicked open. After entering the house, the servants turned around and found that there were no adults in the house. They casually carried several wild animal skins hanging on the wall into their arms. Misty Moon's foolish brother was about to pounce and stop him, but with quick eyes and quick hands, Misty Moon quickly pulled him back. The King of Hell is very difficult to deal with, as there are many people across from him and his parents are not here at the moment. It's not worth fighting over a few wild animal skins. The servants benefited from it, but did not take action against the Obuyue siblings. They only took them to the wheat field in the village. In the village, more and more villagers were pulled out by the guards, and then pushed and shoved to the wheat field. Those who walked slowly were even beaten, and the field was suddenly filled with howls of sorrow. The old village chief leaned on his cane and arched his hand at the poor head, saying, "Poor master, what are you doing? Our village just paid the grain tax a few days ago. We're not here to collect taxes this time," almost holding a knife, gesturing for the villagers to be quiet, and then pointing to the shoehorn man sitting on the horse's back, he said, "This master is the big butler of our Yugwa mansion. He's coming to your village to do something." Upon hearing that it was from the government office, the scene was quiet. The villagers looked at each other and thought to themselves, how could the people from the government office come to our rural area? The shoe puller sitting high on the horse arched his hand and said, "Due to the severe drought in northern Hunan, the Duke of Yu has shown great concern for people's livelihoods. He has invited a highly skilled priest to pray for rain at the Temple of Heaven in 3 days. At that time, multiple boys and girls will be needed as sacrifices. Therefore, today we are here to pick up children in the village, and the chosen family can always receive money." As soon as these words were spoken, the hearts of families with children in the village were raised to the throat. Who would want their children to die? Upon hearing that a human sacrifice was going to be held, Obuyue was also very surprised in her heart. She had only seen such a thing as a child sacrifice in TV dramas and novels before, but did not expect it to happen to her one day. Bring up all the children in the village and show them to the butler, the captain ordered to the servants. As soon as the guards received the order, they began to snatch the children from the villagers. Some villagers who held on to the children were beaten around with sticks by the guards. Several women took advantage of the chaos and ran out holding the children, only to be forced back halfway by the guards with their bright swords. Obuyue and her brother were also dragged out of the crowd by the servants. Her foolish brother didn't know what had happened and even made faces at her sister with a cheerful expression. The children in the village were all driven to the empty land of the rice paddies, and the butler of the Duke of Yu looked over one by one. Most of the children in the village were pale and skinny due to hunger, and a few of them looked sickly. The butler shook his head as he watched, not many of whom had seen it before. Until he saw Obuyue, the butler's eyes lit up and he pointed to her, saying, "This girl looks good, it's her, take it away." With a light sentence, the butler sentenced Obuyue to death. Seeing that it was not their own child who was picked away, the villagers on the field breathed a sigh of relief. The winning bidder, Obuyue, was also speechless, blinking a pair of innocent big eyes and saying, "What? Why are you so good? Looking that you have to be worshipped to heaven." Without waiting for Obuyue's reaction, the servant lifted her up like a chicken. Seeing his own sister about to be taken away, the slow and foolish brother of Obuyue finally realized that the situation was not right. Without saying a word, he relied on his brute force to run into the servant like a calf, and the servant who was holding Obuyue was forcefully knocked away by him from more than 10 meters. During the process of flying, Obuyue was also caught by her brother and then wrapped in her arms. As soon as I saw someone daring to resist, I suddenly felt that my dignity had been provoked. There were also people from the government office watching, so I cursed angrily, "How dare you attack the official? This is going to rebel. Take him down." Under the command, several staff officers holding sticks surrounded the siblings. The young man picked up his sister with one hand and held her tightly in his arms. He bared his teeth at the surrounding staff officers, his eyes fierce like a wolf. The armed attendants, relying on having more people to coax them up, are bound to take the two away. Faced with the fierce and evil servants, Obuyue was firmly protected by her brother, and her heart couldn't help but surge with warmth. Misty Moon's foolish older brother, while protecting his younger sister and fighting with everyone, surprisingly did not fall behind at all. But soon, the cunning servant realized that the weakness of this fool was the little girl in his arms, so Chi changed to attacking the hazy moon in his arms. Upon seeing this, Obuyue cursed in her heart. These despicable things were so shameless that so many people were beating up a fool and a 6-year-old girl. In order to prevent the sister in his arms from being harmed, the foolish older brother, who was tied up, could only dodge with all his might, and could only use his body to resist. The heavy stick rained down like raindrops, hitting the fool's head, shoulders, waist, and legs with a piercing sound. Blood gradually overflowed from his forehead and corners of his mouth, but the foolish older brother remained silent, like a lone wolf protecting his young sister in his arms. Obuyue felt a pang of heartache as she watched, feeling a tug of pain in her heart. "Brother, if you continue like this, you will be beaten to death. Let me go down and I will go with them. I won't be okay." Obuyue couldn't bear to let her foolish brother get hurt again. Dim Moon looks around, and the surrounding villagers have dispersed. It seems that no one will take care of them, and she feels a little cold at once. This is to sweep the snow in front of the door, regardless of the frost on the tiles. The parents haven't returned yet. The best way now is to follow them first and then find a way to escape. "Brother, let me go down." "I won't be fine," said Obuyue, hugging her brother's neck. The young man, however, supported his shaky body and then gently shook his head towards his younger sister, his previously cloudy and dull gaze becoming unusually firm. His meaning is that nothing can separate him and his sister today except death. A servant took advantage of the gap in the conversation between the siblings and walked around behind them, bending a heavy stick towards their brother's leg. The weakest joint in the leg was hit hard, and my brother was hit so hard that he knelt down on both knees. Before falling down, he didn't forget to protect Obuyue in his arms. "Brother!" With a crying voice, Obuyue exclaimed in surprise, feeling so sad that she couldn't speak for a moment. No one has ever worked so hard to protect her. After falling down, Brother Obuyue was immediately stabbed to the ground by a group of officers with sticks and tied up with ropes, while Chatu approached and grabbed Obuyue. The reddened hazy moon, like an angry little rabbit, gnawed on the arm of a servant, who felt pain in his hand and easily threw hazy moon away. The misty moon, which fell to the ground, splashed dust on the ground, and her originally fair and tender face turned gray. Tears rolled around her eyes, and at this moment, she was only angry that she was too weak to be as strong as her mother. Obuyue reluctantly wiped away her tears, her face mixed with dust, and suddenly turned herself into a little flower cat. Obuyue stared at the servant with her big eyes, as if she could punch 2 holes in the next second. This stubborn and pitiful appearance, if Shaninxing had seen it, probably wouldn't have been able to bear it for a long time. He picked up his kitchen knife and turned the whole scene one by one. The servants didn't even pay attention to the hostility of a 6-year-old girl, and even dragged the foolish brother of Obuyue to the ground with a rope, walking arrogantly in front of him, leaving a shocking bloodstain on the ground. As the victorious servants were about to leave the village, they were blocked at the entrance by a group of villagers holding hoes and fishing forks. Even the old village chief with a white beard held up his cane. The hazy moon's eyes were a bit moist as she watched this scene. It turned out that everyone didn't care about them, but went back to the house to get weapons. "Just, why didn't you come earlier? Let go of our Shuja village dolls." The old village chief pointed his cane at the poor guy's nose. "Yes. Put it down." The villagers holding hoes agreed. Chatu angrily rebuked, "What's going on? Are you all rebelling in Shuja village?" The servants also drew their swords when they saw this, and the clear blades emitted a chilly chill. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. I have a bold idea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. I have a bold idea, sir. Our Shuja village has always been law-abiding and pays taxes in accordance with the law, but there is no such thing as collecting child sacrifices in the laws of Daqing. The old village head used to be a private school teacher, with some knowledge of the law. Upon hearing this, the grand steward of the duke's mansion angrily rebuked, "Humph. It's your honor that the children in your village have been chosen as sacrifices to the duke of the kingdom. The world is suffering from a severe drought, and the duke of you cares for the people's livelihoods. He finally invited a highly skilled priest to open the altar and pray for rain, but you dare to obstruct it and delay the heavenly machine. Can you afford it?" Chatu felt his dignity being provoked, and he was afraid of losing face in front of the people in the government office. Suddenly, his anger burned, and he decided to take away Obuyue today and give these troublemakers some color to show. "We will not obstruct the Duke of you from offering sacrifices and seeking rain. The Duke of you is concerned about the disaster, and we are grateful. However, the children worshipped cannot be from our Shuja village," said the old village chief with a resounding voice. In the northern part of Yucheng, almost all the villagers in Zhuangzi have the same surname, and they also have some relatives and connections, so they attach great importance to blood ties and family concepts. Under the guidance of the old village head, the Shuja village has a simple and honest folk style, and the villagers help and support each other like a family. Now that children are affected, it is their bottom line that has been touched. Seeing the tense situation on the field, Fuyue thought to herself, "This really needs to be fought." Faced with the cold blade, the villagers are afraid they won't get any advantage. Old village chief, uncles, Yuer is willing to go to worship. Last night, Grandma Tudi entrusted Yuer with a dream and asked her to go to the Temple of Heaven to worship the heavens and earth. When it came to this, there would be divine powers appearing in the Temple of Heaven. "Don't worry, Yuer will be fine," said Obuyue with a smile to the villagers. Of course, this is deceiving the villagers. The villagers are willing to face the blade of the task force for her, even if she is treated as a mob. Of course, Obuyue also does not want to see these simple villagers bleed to death. Obuyue thought that it would be better to stabilize the situation first and then take the opportunity to run out. Misty Moon verbally recounted the story of daydreaming, causing superstitious villagers to look at each other. They couldn't believe it, but they were also afraid of angering the gods. It seems that Misty Moon is only 6 years old, and it is impossible for children to tell such lies. I voluntarily come with you, but my brother also wants to go with me. You also need to find a doctor to treat his injuries, said Obuyue, pointing to the injured brother and saying to the butler of the National Palace. The steward of the Guogong mansion was also amazed by the fairy's dream. Since this girl voluntarily went to worship, there was no need to have another conflict. After thinking for a while, she agreed to Obuyue's request. Cha-Tu glared fiercely at the rebellious troublemaker holding agricultural tools, meaning to let you go this time and not fall into my hands in the future. So, under the worried gaze of her parents and fellow villagers, Obuyue obediently followed the servant out of the village. The old village chief looked at the distant figures of the Obuyue siblings and turned to call on the 2 villagers to quickly go up the mountain to search for Obuyue's parents. Obuyue was held in her brother's arms and walked with the attendant in the middle of the team. She reached out her small hand to wipe away the blood from the corner of her brother's mouth, thinking about how to retaliate against these bullies when Auntie arrived. The boy, who was beaten to the point where his head was broken and blood was flowing, still looked at his little sister with a smile as if he had no pain. Shujia village is a bit far from Yucheng, and it takes about a day's journey by horse. The group rushed all day and finally arrived at Yubei City in the evening. Misty Moon entered the city, thinking that the city would be more prosperous than the village, but she didn't expect that the city was also dilapidated and desolate. The skinny and hungry people lay on the streets and alleys, with many children's heads bulging and their limbs exceptionally slender. This was caused by eating poisonous wild vegetables. Most shops on the street are closed, and starving people can do anything. There are occasional looting incidents on the street. A crazy woman with empty eyes wandered the bleak streets holding a cold baby corpse, but was eventually pulled into the alley without a trace. The hazy moon looked up at the earthy yellow sky. Based on basic geographical knowledge, locusts flooded first, followed by droughts. With a large number of dead people and plagues rampant, the famine here will only become increasingly severe when the refugees riot, natural disasters combined with man-made disasters. This Central Plains hinterland will become even more turbulent. It is better to flee here as soon as possible. Upon arriving at the mansion of the Duke of China, Obuyue's brother was taken by the doctor for treatment, while Obuyue and other children were taken down by the maid to bathe and burn incense. At night, they also prayed for blessings for the grand ceremony in the tribute hall of the mansion. In the past 2 days at the mansion of the Duke of China, Obuyue finally realized what Zhu Men's wine and meat smelled like, and there were frozen bones on the road. Hungry disaster victims outside can only tighten their stomachs with their waistbands, swallow rice bran and wild vegetables, gnaw on tree bark and grass roots. In areas with more severe disasters, they may even switch to eating. However, the banquet hosted by the Grand Duke and the priests was extremely luxurious. A braised fish dish required dozens of fish to make, and the entire fish was only taken from the lip and gill edges of the fish. Afterwards, the entire fish body was directly thrown into the swill bucket. When a Buddha jumps over a wall, it needs to use more than 10 fresh chickens, fat ducks, fat geese and various seafood to stew the bottom soup. After stewing, the meat is directly fished out and fed to the dog. There are also fresh apples placed in the whole vat of the room, which are not for eating, but for ladies to use for incense. If you stay in the room where the fruit vat is placed for a long time, you will leave a refreshing fruit fragrance on your clothes. Every day in the government office, servants replace the fruits in the vat to ensure they do not spoil or smell. The replaced fruits are also discarded, and even the servants do not eat them. The extravagance and waste of food in the mansion of the Duke of China has already opened up the eyes of Obuyue. She thinks about herself drinking rice bran that pricks her throat in a dilapidated thatched cottage, and how these nobles even eat half and throw half, and even use fruits to incense. Misty Moon had to once again marvel at the unevenness of this world. At night, the meticulously dressed Obuyue knelt in the tribute hall of the mansion, burning incense and praying. Smoke shrouded her body, resembling a little fairy in a painting. Obuyue's brother tilted his head and stared at her intently. The priest, who was supposed to burn incense and pray together, was now lazily drinking alcohol. Not long after, he lay down in front of the tribute table and fell asleep, while the other young children also slept aimlessly. Misty Moon thought to herself, this priest probably looks like a river and lake fraudster. He doesn't care about the disaster victims seeking rain and offering sacrifices. It feels like a pretext put up by the Lord of the Nation for good reputation. This extremely extravagant Lord of the Nation doesn't seem to love the people like a child at all. Late at night, when the hazy moon saw that there was no one guarding her, she wanted to stand up and move around. However, after kneeling for a long time, she suddenly stood up and walked around, feeling dizzy and dark in front of her eyes. In a daze, a voice came from Obuyue's mind. Ding, the number of steps taken has reached 100,000. Congratulations to the host for awakening the spatial system. Upon hearing this voice, Obuyue's first reaction was, as a time traveler, although the golden finger will arrive later, the heavens still love me. The golden finger given is still the kind that can be upgraded by walking. With joy in her heart, Obuyue quickly scanned the system space with her divine sense and found that her spatial layout was somewhat like a fresh food supermarket. Inside, there were rice silos, fish ponds, refrigerators, warehouses, and various shelves and counters. Unfortunately, the supermarket was empty. Good guy, Obuyue understands now. It turns out that we still have to stock up on this goods ourselves. With a gesture of her little hand, Obuyue collected all the fruits and dim sum on the tribute table into the space. The brother next to her thought Obuyue was juggling and laughed happily. Shoo! Obuyue hurriedly raised a finger at the edge of her mouth, asking her brother to speak softly. Then she had a bold idea. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Secret Talks of the National Government. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Secret Talks of the National Government. The hazy moon looks up at the sky, and tonight the moon is dark and the wind is high, making it suitable for travel. In the past 2 days at the Duke's mansion, Obuyue had already figured out the general layout of the mansion. While everyone was asleep, she pulled her brother and prepared to sneak out of the tribute hall. Where are you going? A faint voice came from the corner. Obuyue followed the sound and met a pair of pitiful eyes. It was a round-faced little girl with red circles around her eyes. Obuyue heard that she was sold to the government office by her family for consistent money. Shoo, let's go find something to eat. You stay here obediently, don't wake everyone up, and when I come back, I'll bring you some sugar cakes to eat, said Obuyue softly. Good. The little girl was very obedient when she heard that there would be sugar cakes to eat. She didn't bother with Obuyue anymore and quietly stood by the door watching her siblings leave. After leaving the tribute hall, Obuyue began to run wildly. However, after only a few steps, she saw a group of patrolling servants coming from the front. In a panic, Obuyue quickly took her brother and hid in a nearby room without a lamp. After entering the pitch-black room with her brother, Obuyue didn't turn around when she heard a deep male voice behind her. Lord Gua, are you here? Misty Moon was surprised to find someone in the room. Fortunately, there was no flashlight in the room, and the moon also disappeared into the clouds. The sky and earth were in darkness, so the people in the room did not see clearly that the two children were coming in, and thought they were the agreed-upon Duke. Misty Moon looked at the dim night outside and was thinking about whether to run out. However, before she could let go, she heard footsteps outside the door, which sounded like walking towards the house. Under the dim night light at the door, Obuyue saw a round table with a hanging tablecloth not far from the door. Obuyue quickly led her brother in and crawled in. The person in the inner room heard that the other party had not responded for a long time, and tentatively asked, "Lord Guo." "It's me," a strong voice sounded at the door. Under the table, Obuyue was sweating in her heart. "Mom, this is just too coincidental." She and Duke almost walked into the study with their feet back and forth. Under the table, Obuyue placed her finger on her brother's mouth, signaling him not to speak or make any noise. "Is everything done?" Duke walked to the window and picked up the teapot from his desk under the moonlight, pouring himself a cup of tea. Returning to China, the matter has been settled. The Dongxing governor, who was sent by the court to inspect the disaster relief funds, has been kidnapped by bandits in Hebei province. Well done, his promotion to the position of governor in Hebei province had nothing to do with our northern Hunan. The voice of the Duke of Yu had a faint hint of joy. A court official was kidnapped by a horse bandit, which has brought shame to the royal family. In the next few months, the court's focus will be on eliminating the horse bandits, so Lord Guo can rest assured. Yeah, once we've exhausted the tens of thousands of disaster victims, it's easy to take care of them and keep this matter hidden. Duke Yu happily drank all the tea in his cup and then poured another cup for the person across from him. "You've done a really good job with this," he said. "The praise from the Lord is all cultivated by the Lord." The person hidden in the dark received the praise from the Lord and was overjoyed for a moment. He took the teacup with both hands and drank it all in one gulp. However, before the person could put the teacup back on the table, they suddenly twitched and frothed, falling to the ground in just a few breaths. Then, their neck tilted and they died with their eyes open, with an incredulous expression on their face before death. The hazy moon hidden under the round table, although unable to see what was happening outside through the tablecloth, could still guess what was happening. This Duke of Yu is indeed not a good person. He embezzles disaster relief funds, conspires to assassinate court officials, and even kills people to silence them. "Keep your hands and feet clean, drag them out and bury them," the Duke of Yu, whose face was half hidden in the darkness, commanded the black figure rushing outside the door. "Yes." As the words fell, several black-clothed men quickly dragged the bodies on the ground out in the darkness, as if nothing had happened in the study. The cold moon in the sky gazed at all of this without saying a word, perhaps accustomed to the secrets in this mansion. Duke Yu thought the whole thing was done seamlessly, so he stopped in his study for a moment before leisurely leaving. Little did they know that the two children under the table could see all of this. Fuyue breathed a sigh of relief. She had just overheard so many secrets, and now her back was a bit chilly. The ruthlessness of Duke Yu also made her palpitate. The land grinned and turned, feeling sad about the shortage of food, suffering the common people and fattening the officials. The limerick poem circulating in the community is indeed not groundless. The more she thought about it, the more detestable it became for Obuyue. The glory and wealth in this mansion were all provided by eating human flesh and blood. These nobles trample on the bones of starving people for pleasure, deceiving their own pockets, with greedy and dirty blood dripping from every pore. Misty Moon lifted a corner of the tablecloth and looked out the window. The sky was approaching dawn, and the sacrificial procession was probably already lined up in a long queue on the street. Because the government office was still a certain distance away from the Temple of Heaven, the sacrificial procession had to leave early. When the priest discovers that there are fewer people, he will definitely take them to search in the mansion, so it's better not to go out now. Obuyue thought about it and pulled down the tablecloth again. As expected, when the priest counted the number of sacrificial children before the team went out, he found that the moon was missing and quickly sent a butler to find it. The butler and his servants searched in the mansion without success, and then heard a little girl say that Obuyue went out in the middle of the night. The butler estimated that Obuyue would still be in the city, so he took some servants out to search. As the auspicious time for departure approached, the priest dared not delay and led the team to take a step forward, allowing the butler to quickly deliver the person after finding them. Amidst the crackling sound of firecrackers, the sacrificial procession walked towards the temple of heaven amidst the swirling crimson confetti. The members of the procession were all dressed in red, wearing feather hats and holding incense burners. The soft sedan chairs of the Duke and his family followed the long sacrificial procession closely, and distributed some dried fruit dim sum to the hungry people in a mock way. The hungry people who received the food knelt down and shouted, "Thank you for your kindness." Misty Moon heard the sound of firecrackers and knew that most of the people outside had already left, so she slipped out of the study. Most of the servants in the mansion followed the Duke of Yu to the Temple of Heaven for worship, while the remaining portion followed the butler to search for the moon in the city, so the Duke of Yu's mansion happened to be unguarded at this time. Obuyue and her brother walked lightly around the lobby and headed straight to the backyard. The only thing she had to do now was empty the entire mansion. Originally, before Fuyue fled, she just wanted to go to the kitchen to catch some autumn breeze and bring some food back. But now she has changed her mind, she wants to take care of this Duke of Yu in one pot. Yes, not even the pot is left for Duke Yu. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Empty the entire government office. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Empty the entire government office. The two brothers and sisters of Obuyue first entered the large kitchen in the backyard of the Guogong mansion, because the kitchen was the best to find. Obuyue smelled the smell and came over. As soon as I entered the door, there was a long table with a row of trays full of dim sum on it. When I saw the whole row of desserts, Dim Moon's happy eyes lit up. Thinking that both Auntie and herself loved sweets, Obuyue rudely swept away the pastries on the table. To sum up, there are pine nut lily cake, honeycomb cake, gardenia bean paste cake, milk yellow glutinous rice paste, Job's tears and horseshoe cake, tonguely sweet scented osmanthus cake, snowflake bean paste cake, almond pea puree cake, and some exquisite desserts that can't even be named. Misty Moon walked a few steps inside the long table and saw a row of carved red painted food boxes placed on the wooden frame, with ice bricks placed in the interlayer at the top of the food boxes for preservation. Pull out the food box, and you can find all kinds of dishes from all over the world, such as gold and silver crab meat roll, braised peanut pork hand, shredded mushroom and chicken with bird's nest, fresh shrimps with pepper and vinegar, pork loin, braised Sishi lion head in soy sauce, roast squab, and stewed Obuyue duck in soy sauce. You can see that the moon is full of saliva. On the small bench, Misty Moon opened the steaming tray on the stove, where there were steamed big white mantou, scallion steamed rolls, naked oats, pork buns, crab roe steamed dumplings and other pastries. Seeing so many delicious foods, Obuyue thought happily to herself, now she has a taste buds, no need to eat Auntie's dark dishes every day, and no need to go hungry. The foolish older brother standing next to him, seeing his sister's joyful expression, also followed him foolishly. Misty Moon looked around and saw a row of bamboo baskets placed on the wooden frame opposite, which were baskets of eggs, duck eggs, goose eggs, and quail eggs. On the beam of the kitchen, there are still large chunks of smoked ham, yellow cured chicken, plump cured duck and goose, and half a fan of pork hanging. With a wave of her small hand, Obuyue packed all these foods into the space. In the corner of the east wall, there were still some pumpkins, radishes, cabbage, and sweet potatoes piled up. After filling this pile of vegetables, Obuyue scanned the stove and cleaned up all the grain, oil, sauce, aged vinegar, and salt on the stove. Finally, I didn't even let go of the several large iron pots hanging on the stove. Looking at the empty kitchen of the government office and the almost filled freezer in the space, Obuyue felt a special sense of achievement. After searching the kitchen, the brother and sister went to the granary and emptied the contents of 50 stone rice, 40 liters of sorghum flour, 20 bags of corn flour, and 2 vats of pickled vegetables. With these grains, it is not a problem to support the entire village on the way to escape famine. After thinking about the upcoming winter season, there must be supplies to keep warm on the road. Misty Moon sneaked into the warehouse and asked her brother to unlock the door. She then emptied all the colorful brocade fabrics, quilts, cotton jackets, goose-down cloaks, cotton boots, and various animal fur necklaces and coats from the mansion. As they passed by the mansion where Obuyue lived, Obuyue and her brother rummaged through boxes and cabinets in the room. Finally, they found the darkroom behind a row of bookshelves. After entering the darkroom, Obuyue was almost blinded by the abundance of gold and silver in the room. The entire darkroom was paved with silver bricks, with a small pyramid made of gold bricks in the center. Countless gold and silver jewelry were piled up in the corners, and boxes of night pearls shone brightly. Clusters of jade corals formed a rockery. Obuyue was a bit stunned when she saw that all the disaster relief funds from the court had been sent here. After a moment of silence, Obuyue finally came to her senses. After all, she had never seen so much money in her entire life. Then she gently waved her small hand, leaving nothing that would shine. After leaving the residence of the Duke of Yu, Obuyue collected all the items that could be taken away from the Duke's mansion, such as tables, chairs, benches, stationery, calligraphy, and painting. Wherever she went, it was like a locust passing through, not letting go of a single stitch. Finally, this empty mansion of the Duke of Yu looked even cleaner than the face of Obuyue, and even had an echo when speaking. After tossing and turning for a while, the Duke's mansion was finally looted. Obuyue wiped the sweat off her forehead and thought to herself that the squeezed and plundered wealth and cream of the people should be taken from the people and given to them. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any medicinal herbs here. It seems that I will have to find opportunities to stock up on them in the future. With a few rooster crows, the eastern sky has turned white with fish bellies. Obuyue asked her brother to carry herself out of the wall and prepare to escape back to Shujia village. The siblings wanted to avoid being noticed, so they chose to walk in the alley. Unfortunately, they happened to bump into the Grand Steward of the Duke's mansion, who was searching for the moon. Looking at the gloomy-looking butler of the Guogong mansion across from him, as well as a group of eager servants. "Good morning," said the hazy moon with a forced smile at the corner of her mouth. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Dad and Mom saved the scene in a timely manner. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Dad and Mom saved the scene in a timely manner. After saying hello, Obuyue pulled her brother around and ran away, thinking to herself that the enemy's path was narrow, and she could even run into him in the alley. "Where are you running? Stop me." The butler and a group of servants chased after him, searching for him all morning, and finally caught him. Running and running, the panicked siblings ran into a dead end. Seeing that there was no way left, Brother Obuyue protected his sister behind and kicked the surrounding servants 10 meters away. Everyone was shocked. This fool's strength was so great that he couldn't lie down for 10.5 days after being kicked. The bare-handed servants were a bit hesitant. "What are you all staring at? Who caught that little girl first?" "The reward is 10 guan," shouted the butler. The hazy moon, hidden behind her brother, stuck out her small head and spat out her tongue at the big butler of the Duke's mansion, and even gave her 10 guan of money as a reward. "Your Duke's mansion in Yu is now penniless." As soon as the servants heard of the bounty, they immediately turned red and rushed towards the hazy moon. Upon seeing the situation, Brother Obuyue became entangled in a fight with the servants who rushed towards him. Although brother had immense strength, there were many people in front of him, and he also had to protect his sister, so the fight was somewhat cramped. Obuyue didn't want to drag her brother down. She saw a dog hole on the wall behind her, which was just the size to accommodate children, so she crawled out directly. "I originally thought that after escaping from the dead end, I would be able to fly freely in the sky and sea." As soon as the hazy moon crawled out, it was met by a burlap. A servant who had been waiting outside the dog hole for a long time smiled and said, "Hee hee, this is called waiting for a rabbit." Misty Moon. Before she could call for help, Obuyue was knocked unconscious by the sleeping pills. When Obuyue woke up again, she found herself tied to a high altar, with thick dry firewood piled up under her feet. It seemed like she was about to be sacrificed by fire. She tried to turn her neck, but turned her head right in front of a pair of black blood-stained eyes, which frightened the hazy moon and made her shiver. Obuyue fixed her gaze and saw that this was the little girl she met the night she ran away. She even said she would bring her candy cake back. And now the little girl's face is dark blue, her lips are black, black blood is oozing from her eyes and nostrils, and her whole body is trembling, looking extremely painful. At first glance, this symptom is caused by taking poison, and Obuyue looked at the children around her and found it to be the same. In addition, Obuyue also smelled a pungent smell of sulfur, suggesting that before departure, the priest had tampered with the food to prevent the children from crying. What a wicked and malicious means! Not long after, these children hung their heads and lost their vitality, and Obuyuki could only watch them die helplessly. Under the altar, the priest is dancing as a great deity. He is telling the gods about the disasters that have occurred in the mortal world through dancing, and then asking the gods to show mercy to the world by bringing rain and dew, and rescuing the people from water and fire. Of course, only heaven knows whether the gods can understand or not. Obuyue stood on the altar and glanced down. Beneath the altar were the vast victims, all eagerly anticipating that their divine powers would manifest and rain and dew would fall. After the priest finished dancing, he took the burning torch from the maid's hand and then lit the dry firewood on the altar. The tongue of fire licked the withered firewood and in an instant, it burned to the feet of the hazy moon. The pungent burnt smell and burning black ash poured into the mouth and nose of the hazy moon, causing her eyes to choke and tears to fall. Her small face was also charred by the smoke and ash. Please enjoy the offerings, rain and dew, and bless the people. The Duke of Yu shouted and knelt down, with a genuine expression on his face, as if he truly loved the people like a son. The priest also shouted 3 times, knelt down, and worshipped towards the fire. However, the hazy moon, which was burned on the fire, felt no pain at all. Because the flame was blocked by an invisible barrier 10 centimeters away from her. Outsiders can only see her surrounded by flames, but they cannot see the burning inside. The hazy moon was startled in her heart. What is this? Auntie's barrier ability. Wu Wunyang finally arrived, and Obuyue wept with joy, knowing that she would definitely come. She remembered that after crossing through and being reborn, Auntie still retained the barrier ability of her previous life, which could generate an invisible barrier to resist external attacks. When she and Auntie went up the mountain to dig wild vegetables before, Auntie had opened a barrier to protect her from the attacks of wild beasts. The fire was burning fiercely for half an hour, but the hazy moon in the fire remained intact. After discovering it, everyone was shocked and thought that a divine power had truly appeared, so they all knelt down and worshipped towards the hazy moon. The priest and the Duke of Yu also looked at each other. We were just pretending, but why did we invite the true God? Soon, Obuyue noticed that the people below were all looking at her with respectful eyes. Misty Moon had a sudden inspiration. Since these people mistakenly believe that they are possessed by gods, it's better to make good use of this identity. Obuyue cleared her throat and pretended to be very mature. I am a Taoist named Xingyue. While practicing, I encountered a group of unjust spirits. The unjust spirits accused the Duke of Dekinjiu of embezzling disaster relief funds, deceiving officials of the court, and using fame and reputation to harm children. However, upon investigation, I found out about this matter. Today, I am here to seek justice for the world. As soon as these words were spoken, there was an instant uproar in the audience, and the people couldn't believe their ears. What? Is the Duke of Yu actually a corrupt official seeking fame and reputation? People, for a while, you look at me and I look at you. I don't know if you should believe it, but after all, this is a manifestation of immortals. Can what immortals say still be false? Demonic words deceive the public. I think this girl has been corrupted by filth. The Duke of Yu trembled with anger and stood up, pointing at Obuyue and cursing. The priest on the side saw that the situation was not right and quickly shouted, "This girl is a sacrifice to the gods. I have never heard of any nonsense, such as the Star-Moon Taoist. It must be an evil god from somewhere. This girl is filthy and cannot be completely burned with fire. She must be the one who caused the disaster in northern Hunan." Upon hearing this, Obuyue sighed and realized that this great swindler and priest had a remarkable ability to stir up trouble. Master, since this fierce person cannot be burned to death with fire, we will smash her to death with stones. As long as she dies, the drought will come to an end. At this moment, the Duke of Yu also regarded Obuyue as a thorn in his side and called on the people to pick up stones and smash the disaster star Obuyue to death. Yes. Smash this witch to death. Whoever hits it once will be rewarded with silver. Before the Duke of Yu could finish speaking, a farmer with messy hair like rolling grass rushed out of the crowd, kicked him in the heart, and then cursed loudly, "Dare! You dare to plan to harm the imperial heir! I will execute your 9 clans." Faced with this sudden change on the field, everyone was a bit dumbfounded. Yu Guogong felt a kick in his mouth, stumbled back several steps, and then froze for a few seconds. He was so proud that Yu Guogong was actually beaten by a farmer. This person dares to commit the following crimes. How dare he? As soon as Obuyue saw the person on the stage, she was instantly delighted. Isn't this exactly her own emperor and father? Woo, new author seeking collection in comments, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. Duke's Death and Grain Rain Falling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Duke's Death and Grain Rain Falling. Bold. How dare you attack the Duke of Yu? Hurry up and have someone take down this madman. The priest saw that someone dared to openly attack the Duke of Yu. Is that okay? Let go of your mother's recklessness. If you dare to say it in front of me, you are the one who dares to be reckless. Obuyue's father pointed at the priest's nose and cursed loudly. What Misty Moon's father scolded was taken for granted and filled with anger. After all, in his eyes, he regarded himself as superior and others as inferior. The Duke of Yu really didn't know where the confidence of the farmer in tattered grass shoes came from before him. He was so arrogant. After snorting coldly, he ordered the guards, "Take this madman down for me." As soon as Duke Yu finished speaking, several arrow feathers with piercing sounds roared towards him, and the guards fell in response without even drawing their swords. People looked in the direction of the arrow, and at some point, a woman in cloth holding a bow and arrow stood on the altar. The woman held the bow in one hand and the girl rescued from the fire in the other. Seeing that the goal of diverting attention and rescuing Obuyuki had been achieved, Obuyuki's father took the opportunity to jump out of the field and blend into the crowd. When the Duke of Yu and everyone came to their senses, the figure of Obuyue's father was no longer present on the stage. On the altar, Shaninxing was about to escape with Obuyue, but Obuyue shook her head and whispered a few words in Auntie's ear. Since the people in the audience now believe that they are possessed by gods, they can take this opportunity to settle accounts with the Duke of Yu. Shaninxing knew that his daughter was exceptionally intelligent, and there was a reason for doing so, so he decided to cooperate with her in acting. The Xingyue Taoist borrowed the body of a child to bring justice to his lonely soul. The Duke of Yu committed many unjust acts, embezzled disaster relief funds, and starved hundreds of thousands of people. Now, he orders the Duke of Yu to commit suicide and apologize. Shaninxing scolded. Empty words without evidence. What evidence do you have? The enraged Duke of Yu was actually extremely guilty, but now he can only be stubborn and refuse to admit it. Being pointed at by Duke Yu for evidence, Obuyue gave him a very disdainful glance and said, "What I, the Xingyue Taoist, said is evidence. Don't believe it, this girl is from an evil god who came from somewhere. She said she is a fairy, she is a fairy. Our Duke of Yu has spared no effort to mourn the disaster victims and pray for rain. How could he be such an shameless person? The priest also spoke up on the side. After all, he and the government are on the same rope as grasshoppers. There are both believers and unbelievers among the people in the audience. Although this girl is not afraid of fire, there is indeed no name for the star moon Taoist among the gods worshipped in Bikingwo. Misty Moon saw through everyone's thoughts. It seems that it's not enough to show her hands today. Misty Moon asked his mother to hold her up to the high altar and then pointed to the sky with one hand. Immortals come out, and the rain falls from the valley. As they finished speaking, everyone looked up at the earthy yellow sky with eager eyes. After waiting for a while, everyone saw that there really seemed to be some point-like object swaying down in the air. A skinny old farmer reached out to pick it up and found that what had fallen was a golden grain of rice. Ha ha ha, it's rice. It's rice. It's really raining. It's still raining. The joyful old farmer laughed heartily. What a miracle, it's a miracle. This is not a dream. The overjoyed crowd gathered their clothes and went to pick up the grains. Some disaster victims, who have already been starving and emaciated, directly open their mouths to pick up rice and swallow it whole, regardless of whether the rice is raw. For them, this is life-saving food. Many people cry while eating and say, "Thank you for the gift from heaven. Thank you, Master Xingyue." There are also some people lying on the ground picking up grains, shedding tears while picking them up, crying for their old mother who couldn't survive hunger. Of course, this is not a miracle, it's just that Obuyue moved the food she found in the government office out of the space, and then caused a rain of grain to fall from the sky. Just as the people below picked it up, they found that the rain had stopped, and then they all looked up at the hazy moon on the altar. Misty Moon remained silent, pretending to be a cool and aloof 9 heavenly gods. I would like to express my gratitude to Taoist Xingyue and request him to reign again to save all the people in the world. The people below kowtowed and knelt down to express their gratitude. Everyone now believes that the Star Moon Taoist has boundless magical power and is a living immortal who has descended to save others and possesses great supernatural powers. The Duke of Yu is dead, and the valley rain is falling, said the hazy moon as she pointed to the stunned Duke of Yu next to her. The people finally realized that there was still a Duke of Yu who was accused by immortals of embezzling grain funds and committing evil deeds. So the people were instantly enraged and began to besiege the Duke of Yu. The Duke of Yu, who was protected by his servants, shouted, "You are so brave. You dare to beat the Duke of Yu. Aren't you afraid to lose your head?" At this moment, the starving disaster victims don't care about your identity. With the presence of immortals, how old is your identity? The immortal gave us food, and you embezzled our food. I don't care about you, Duke of the country. Even if the Emperor comes today, he will still fight without delay. Thousands of disaster victims gathered around the government office and were beaten up indiscriminately. The servants couldn't bear the anger of the people. The Duke of Yu was soon beaten to pieces, his clothes were torn apart, and the nearby priests were not spared. They were beaten to death together. The hazy moon father, who had been standing in the crowd with his sleeves all along, felt lost in thought when he saw this scene. Report. Report. Report to Lord Guogong. The butler of the Guogong mansion rushed over with a small group of servants from outside, his face flustered, as if there was something urgent. But seeing the chaos on the scene, people huddled together and unable to find the Duke of Yu, they had to shout loudly, "Lord of Yu, it's not good. The Duke's mansion has been robbed. The mansion has been looted and not even a set of dishes has been left." Upon hearing that the mansion had been robbed, Duke Yu struggled to stand up from the ground and asked, "What about the things behind my bookshelf?" The butler said with a bitter face, "It's gone. It's all gone. There's nothing left." The Duke of Yu was originally kicked in his heart and then beaten up. Now that he heard that his mansion had been looted and nothing was left, his heart was filled with anger. He vomited 3 liters of blood and fainted to the ground. Rarely, the people who wished to eat its meat raw would flock together and wake up the Duke of Yu alive. Later, before his death, Duke Yu's eyes straightened and he murmured, "It's gone, nothing." The golden rain of grain rained down from the sky again, and the Duke of Yu died amidst the laughter of the people. Obuyue felt a sense of great revenge in her heart, not only for the children who died from the sacrifice, but also for the victims who starved to death. But the money plundered in a government office cannot be directly distributed, because in times of chaos, she still understands the principle of harboring guilt. After looking for a while, Obuyue suddenly realized that there was no figure of Auntie beside her. She looked around and finally found that Auntie was also busy picking up rice. So Mou hurriedly ran to Shiniching's side, revealing 2 small dimples on her face. She gave her a mysterious smile and said, "Auntie, we don't need to pick it up." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Star Moon Taoist's Exit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Star Moon Taoist's Exit. Misty Moon moved 50 stones of rice from the granary of the Duke's mansion, and just scattered about 40 stones, which was enough for the disaster victims in the city to eat for a while. Although it was not enough to last until the end of the famine, it saved a little bit and was enough to survive on the escape route. Now she has dozens of liters of flour in addition to 10 stones of rice in her space, so it's not a problem to feed a few more villages. The grain rain gradually stopped, and the clothes used by the disaster victims to carry rice were bulging and weighed 4 or 5 pounds when lifted, with a cheerful expression on everyone's faces. Thank you, Taoist Xingyue, for bringing rain of grain and blessings to all people. The disaster victims who received food all bowed to the hazy moon, thanking the gift from the gods. Obuyue pretended to be very mature, then nodded and said, "This time, I am giving the grain rain, which has consumed most of my spiritual energy. I will be practicing in seclusion for thousands of years. Water and drought in heaven and earth are natural laws, and human labor can break them. Everyone should cherish them on the way." The translated meaning of this passage is that today, the rain of grain has consumed a lot of manna, and I need to go back and sleep for thousands of years. Water and drought disasters are natural laws, but people can also use their intelligence to manage them. Now that everyone has food, hurry up and flee. I can only help here. To be honest, the small amount of grain rain that falls can only save the people in Yucheng. There are hundreds of thousands of disaster victims in northern Hunan, and the grain in the hazy moon space is just a drop in the bucket. Saving people can only be done within one's own capabilities. Everyone understood the meaning and once again expressed their gratitude to Taoist Xingyue. After thinking for a moment, Obuyue added, "The gods of the 9 heavens are not good at killing. In the future, there should be no more human or animal sacrifices. Moreover, when faced with any situation, do not first seek the gods. Everyone is their own god in their hearts." Saying this is because Obuyue is afraid that after this matter spreads, the entire Dekingwo will stir up a wave of seeking gods and worshipping immortals, and then there will be children suffering. Furthermore, everyone always wants to ask for help from immortals if they have nothing to do. Even if so many people petition together, immortals cannot help. You need to put in more effort first. Respecting the teachings of the Xingyue Taoist, the audience shouted 3 times and knelt down again to show their respect and gratitude for the immortal. Misty Moon saw that it was about time for Xingyue Taoist to leave, so she pretended to have a convulsion all over her body, and then collapsed to the ground. When she looked up again, her eyes were filled with childlike innocence and ignorance, without any maturity or steadiness. Misty Moon pretended to be stunned for a while, as if she were a child who had just woken up. Then she opened her small hand and cried to Shiniching next to her, "Wu, where is this, Auntie? I need to go home." At first glance, the people below knew that the immortal had already left, so they all knelt down and said, "Farewell to the Star Moon Taoist." Misty Moon saw that the people believed it to be true and couldn't kneel down on stage, so she quickly called on Auntie to take her away from here. After all, he is a fake immortal. Being worshipped by so many people makes me feel a bit uneasy. It's better to hurry and leave. The matter was over, and the family of 3 were walking back to the village. Shiniching held Obuyue in his arms and kissed her again and again, saying, "My dear daughter, you almost scared me to death. Your father and I had to hurry for 2 days and 2 nights to finally catch up. Fortunately, you're okay. If you have any mishaps, I'll go burn down the Guogong mansion." "Hee Auntie, the Guogong mansion is just empty now. It's useless if you burn it," said Obuyue with a playful smile. "Bao, what happened to the last day of the valley rain? And what about the star moon Taoist? Tell me about it." The emperor's father of the Misty Moon followed his wife around, trying to pick him up and hold him in his arms, only to be glared back by Shiniching with a dagger. Shiniching was also very curious about what was going on, looking expectantly at the hazy moon. "Misty Moon. Auntie, I awakened the spatial system at the Duke's mansion, which feels a bit like awakening a power. Then I happened to hear about Dukyu's embezzlement of grain funds, so I used this power to create a situation on the altar." After hearing this, Shiniching immediately realized, "So, you actually emptied the Guogong mansion, and the grain rain that falls is actually the grain in the granary. Hee, you truly deserve to be my mother," said Obuyue with a smile. Misty Moon's father listened in a mist on the side. He couldn't understand the awakening of spatial system abilities, but he also understood the general situation and praised, "It's truly my royal bloodline." "What does this have to do with your royal bloodline? In our era, everyone had talents and abilities, and my family's Misty Moon has just awakened now." Shiniching glanced at Su Jingyang, but she couldn't stand this guy's always superior attitude and his bloodline theory. Su Jingyang was too lazy to argue with Shiniching. He put his hands in his sleeves and thought happily to himself, "Anyway, this is my royal seed, and the bloodline of my heavenly family is remarkable." A family of 3 walked along the way back to the village, talking and laughing, but Obuyue always felt like something was missing from her side. After thinking for a long time, Obuyue stared at Auntie's face and asked, "Where's my brother?" Shiniching and Su Jingyang just realized now, it's terrible. They forgot about their son. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Calculation of new and old accounts together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Calculation of new and old accounts together. When Shiniching found his foolish son, he found him circling around a alley, his eyes still red, as if he had just cried. After the foolish brother of Obuyue ran away from the group of household servants, he found that he couldn't find his little sister anymore. He thought he had lost his sister, so he wanted to go out and find someone. However, his mind was not very good, and he couldn't get out of this small alleyway, so he could only be in a hurry. Upon seeing her brother who had been wandering in the alley all along, Obuyue's nose became sore. She quickly ran over and hugged him, saying, "Brother, I'm sorry for making you worry." Obuyue saw her little sister come back unscathed, and in an instant, she jumped 3 feet high with joy. While foolishly lifting her sister over her head and hitting her horse shoulder, she ran back and forth on the road. Obuyue was also amused by him and laughed heartily. Having regained their daughter and obtained food, the family of 4 returned to the village with a relaxed and lively atmosphere. Su Jingyang threw away his pair of tattered grass shoes and put on the soft leather boots brought out by Obuyue from the Guogong mansion. He took an official step in front of him, and walked out of the sky and earth with the aura of being the only one I could hold. Obuyue takes out some desserts, such as honeycomb cake, gardenia bean paste cake, and so on, which are looted in the government, and gives them to her family. After Shiniching eats them, she shouts delicious food. The food in this world is really better than nutrient solution and protein cubes. Su Jingyang, on the other hand, still had an air of mediocrity. In his eyes, these desserts were far inferior to those made by imperial chefs in the palace. On the hazy moon road, we also bought a cart as a means of transportation. The family sat on the cart, eating delicious food and drinking fine wine, and walked back to Shujia village in a leisurely manner. After getting off the ox cart, Obuyue ran towards the old village chief's house. She wanted to thank the old village chief well. When she was about to be taken away by the police, the old village chief came with the villagers to stop her. As a result, Obuyue walked around the village but didn't see a single person. Shininshin frowned as he looked at the open doors of every household. It was obvious that the houses of the villagers had been searched and there were traces of searching everywhere. There is movement on the wheat field. Su Jingyang tilted his ear and pointed in the direction of the wheat field. The Obuyue family glanced at each other and hurried towards the wheat field. The originally empty wheat field is now crowded with people, and almost the head is leading the servants to beat up the villagers. Beside him stands a group of soldiers wearing iron armor and holding spears. Boss. They do have grain reserves. We have searched a lot and found that these troublemakers just don't want to pay their grain. The servants took pictures of half of the bags of rice brought out from the farmers' homes. No, that's the rice seed we left behind. We'll plant it next year. A skinny farmer grabbed a bag and tried to snatch the rice seed back. Get lost. The servant turned around and kicked the farmer to the ground. The farmer was about to stand up in pain when he swung a stick and hit him head-on. The servant scolded him while beating, "If you dare to obstruct public officials again, take them to the yamen and serve them severely." The old village chief hunched his body and said calmly, "Poor master, we paid the grain tax before." With an impatient expression on his face, Cha Tu said, "I've told you all. You paid a grain tax before, but now we're going to collect military rations. The Chang people in the north are causing chaos and invading the northern border of Hunan. The court is gathering 300,000 troops from central Hunan to fight. The military headquarters has spoken, and we can't lose a single grain of 30 million military rations. 30 million. The old village chief's beard turned white with anger upon hearing this. This year, the northern and central regions of Hunan suffered from a severe drought, with no harvest of grain. People rely on old-aged grains to make a living. Now that the stored grain is almost depleted, let alone 30 million, the entire northern region of Hunan cannot even gather 300,000. In times of famine, the court frequently levied taxes. How can we survive? I don't care how you live. If you don't pay enough food today, you'll all be beaten. I remember last time these troublemakers almost made me lose face in front of the people in the government office. He came here today to seek personal revenge. Beat me. Beat me hard, these troublemakers won't shed tears until they see the coffin." With just one command, families who did not pay enough food were taken to the rice paddies to be beaten, men were beaten, and women were crying while holding their children. The Obuyue family came back just in time to encounter the scene of evil soldiers bullying the people. Seeing this group of villains bullying the villagers again, Obuyue is already so angry that she is about to vent her anger. Oh, this is really a narrow path for enemies. This time, let's settle the new and old accounts together. Little transparent writer, seeking collection and comments, after cleaning up this gang of villains, we are ready to start fleeing the wilderness. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Auntie's Liveliness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Auntie's Liveliness. Auntie, it was these servants who captured Yuer and injured our brother. They surrounded and beat us, and even dragged our brother to the ground with ropes. Sigh, there was a lot of blood flowing at that time. Misty Moon complained to Shininshin with her big, watery eyes, and then peeled off her brother's shirt, revealing the purple and red bruises on his back. Shininshin's temper is so hot that he can easily get hurt, let alone his precious children. As a mother, seeing the shocking bruises on her child's back, Shininshin was already angry like a volcano ready to erupt at any moment. Auntie, which one should I use for a kitchen knife or a brick? The thoughtful little cotton jacket, Obuyue, presented weapons to her mother with both hands. Shininshin shook his head and said, Yuer, remember, at this time, when you hit someone and vent your anger, you should use your fist. After speaking, Shininshin rolled up his sleeves and walked straight to the wheat field, leaving everyone with a murderous silhouette. On the field, almost the head saw Shaninqing walking over and thought she was just an ordinary woman looking for her husband. He shouted loudly, "Which family are you from? How did you come from outside? Where did you hide just now?" Cha Tu's arrogant spittle almost flew onto Shaninqing's face, and then he reached out to drag her. Faced with the poor leader's inquiry, Shaninqing remained silent and then flew up to kick the poor leader's heart, causing him to fly backwards. Shaninqing's kick caught everyone off guard, and everyone only saw a trace of him. He struggled to stand up with his head covering his chest, looking incredulously at the woman in front of him. Surprisingly, he was kicked out by a woman. The attendants next to them were also dumbfounded. How could anyone dare to beat them? Is the hitter or a woman? I felt like my chest was hurting so much that it exploded, as if I had been hit hard by a heavy hammer. He touched his waist with both hands and wanted to pull out the sword from his waist, but Shaninqing took the lead in holding down his hands. Then she bent her elbow and fiercely hit the abdomen of Cha Tu, causing Cha Tu to become unstable. Shaninqing tilted his front legs to the side when he saw the opportunity, and a sliding shovel flipped his head to the ground. In the midst of lightning and fire, Shaninqing handed over his waist sword and then swung his fist to fiercely strike his temple, making it sound like a tiger or a gust of wind. Catching my daughter and beating my son, right? Roaming in the countryside, the common people are like fish and meat, right? I haven't been educated since I was this big, have I? Shaninqing punched one after another, punching to the flesh, almost tilting his head and nose to one side. The corners of his eyes cracked and blood gushed out. His face was like a paint shop, blooming with blue, red, and purple colors. A village woman was actually physically assaulting an official, and everyone present was shocked and stood still. Obuyue exclaimed in pleasure as she watched from behind, then extended her thumb and exclaimed, "Auntie is so fierce." The poor head on the ground was beaten so hard that he could only breathe in but not out. Then he reached out his trembling hand and pointed to the servant on the side, struggling to shout out a sentence from his throat. "You are all dead, aren't you?" As soon as these words were spoken, the servants who were staring at them suddenly woke up, as no one had ever seen a scene of a village woman beating an official. The servants who reacted drew their swords and slashed at Shaninqing. Seeing that the chaotic knife was about to strike Shaninqing, a very eerie scene occurred. Everyone's blades stopped at a distance of 10 centimeters from Shaninqing's body, and the servants felt as if they had struck an invisible wall. Auntie's barrier skill is a defense weapon in melee, so you want to hurt her too. Moyue sat on her brother's shoulder, cheering on Auntie. Auntie rushes towards the duck. Beat them to death. She never forgot how these despicable servants bullied herself and her brother back then. Have you finished chopping? It's my turn. Shaninqing glanced at the servants, his murderous gaze chilling their hearts. End of this chapter.